Welcome friends. In this video what we're going to do is basically add a checkbox so that we can make our interface element collapsible and expandable so it takes less space on the page. It's a useful little feature. So let's begin here. First of all, what we're going to do is the following. So that we have something to hide and to expand, we want to take everything that is the details view and enclose it within a panel. So to do that, take a look. From the left side, type panel, in the toolbox search box, type panel, and then drag a panel into the page and just place it right above the details view right here. I'm going to call this here DV and then details view panel as shown. Run at server, correct. Take the closing tag and you got to drag that and close the entire details view in it. So go down to the bottom a little bit and just make sure you enclose the details view in it as shown here. So the details view is now enclosed within the panel. I'm going to have to zoom out here. There's too much code at this point. Just like this. So let's see. It begins over here. You've got the panel. And I'm going to break this up over lines. Okay, so now that we have everything enclosed in a panel, the next stage is to basically do the following. Right outside the panel, for now just add a checkbox. So on the left side in the toolbox, type CHE, and then drag and drop a checkbox into the page as shown here. Rename the ID on the checkbox so it's more meaningful. I'm going to say here CHK and then details view, and then run at server, leave that. And just next to it, place some text, like for example here, show details. And let's leave it in this format first. Right here. We've got the panel, remember, so that we have something to open and to hide. And within the panel, we've got the details view. Okay, build it. And let's observe the effect the first time. Let's see what happens here. Let me just relaunch the page. Alright, so it looks as shown here. Let me cancel that action. And you've got this nice thing that says show details. When you click on it, of course, it doesn't do anything. So we need to add functionality to basically be able to hide and then show the panel down below so things can be smaller. Okay, and takes less space on the page. So to accomplish this, take a look here. First of all, make sure you select the checkbox. And let's add some additional configuration settings to it. I'm going to stack things this way this time. Alright, ID, CHK, details view, correct. I'm going to say here, run that server. We've got that. That's good. I'm going to add another property called auto post back. So when you interact with it, it sends everything back to the server. Set that to true. That's all it means. And lastly, by default, say we want it to be loaded, which in other words means that the element will show on the page collapsed rather than expanded. So set this property in value, say here checked, and set that equal to true at first. Alright, so before I continue, build this, and let's take a look at the effect of what we've created here. Alright, load the page, give it a second, and it looks as shown here. Alright, so this here is show details, and notice that now it's doing something, correct? It's reloading when I interact with the checkbox. It wasn't doing that before. I'm going to shut this down completely. And I'm going to launch it completely again from scratch. So I just hit Google Chrome here. Let's see what happens. Okay. And notice that by default, as you can see, it's now loading with the checkbox checked, as you can see. All right, and the checkbox actually causes a post back to the server to get a fresh copy of things. So I'm going to close this. And next stage in the process is this one, collapse that. So we've just configured a checkbox. So now do this, go over to design mode and double click on the checkbox. Okay, double click on the checkbox. And this should bring up our C# code behind file that says chk details view underscore checked changed. Remember, this is the code that runs when we interact with the checkbox. So here, the code that we are going to create will take the following simple form. We are going to say this: if, and then I will say here chk details view.checked. So if that box has been checked, then the panel should be shown, correct? The panel is what we are controlling with the checkbox. So we have a collapsible interface element. So I'll say if check details dot checked, that is true, you're gonna have to take the following and say dv and then panel, details view panel, and then dot visible and set that equal to true as shown. Of course, the other possibility is the box is unchecked, which means then you want to hide the panel that contains the details view. So I will say here else, and I will say dv panel visible and set that equal to false. That's it. So remember, simple if-else logic. If the box is checked, show the panel with the details view. If it's unchecked, you hide the panel. That's it. So it's collapsible. It's a collapsible, draggable, droppable, savable user interface element. All right, just about as flexible as you can make it. Very good. So now let's give this a go and see what the effect is. Let's reload the page. So let's see. Google Chrome. All right, so let's take a look. Hit show details. All right, and notice that it hides quite nicely. The question is, does everything else that we've made work with it? So first of all, check it again, and it opens up. Uncheck it, it closes. That's good. All right, so leave it unchecked, move it over here, and then reload the page. Will the position still stick between page loads? All right, it doesn't seem to be popping away from its position. You see that? It even looks better, right, when you refresh it this mode. Right, expand this for a second. Pull it back. Right, click on edit. And notice when you do that, what happens. So click on edit as an example. And notice that upper left-hand side, it kind of reloads the page, as you can see. So the last stage might be to basically add some AJAX to disable that. So let me close this for a second. Close this down. All right, and now go back to main.aspx and to source view. And lastly, the last bit that we want to add is as follows here. And here we have to be super careful now. Right past the checkbox, I'm going to add the following. I'm going to type ASP and then update panel like that. We're going to enclose everything in an update panel. That reduces flickering of interface elements between page loads. I'm going to say here content template next. And within the content template now, we're going to have to stick in everything that we have created, okay? And then we'll see whether that works. So grab everything, including the panel, but don't use the data source. So this is an easier way of doing it. Take a look. Make sure you place a cursor on the same line as the panel here, okay? And then collapse it on the left side. Just collapse it. Once you have it collapsed, you can move it as a unit. This is what I mean. You can basically highlight it and then left press and then drag it as a single unit so it takes less space and drop it into the content template. And give it a second to take here. So this is how you can move a whole chunk of code. All right? So that looks as shown here at this stage. Let me fix up the code a little bit. As you can see at this point, there's no way to avoid the complexity of the code. There's just a lot of it just to make some basic effects happen, as shown. And at the next stage, take a look. The update panel, remember, needs the run at server. So I'm going to add that next. Run it and then server. And remember that because of the design of the update panel, you need also a script manager. So let me go to the top and just stick a script manager in there somewhere. Right after the form, for example. All right, so put a script manager so that the update panel will work correctly. All right, let me see how far I can zoom out. After that, it gets hard to see, correct? This is already a lot. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do Control A and then right click on everything and then go over to format the selection. So Control A, right click, format the selection. Sometimes that fixes the appearance of things a little more. So it looks as shown here and it's indented more nicely. I'm going to pull this that way. Okay, so you have to look through this very carefully. You have to be really sure that everything is in the right sequence and nested correctly. Keep in mind that I do have this under lesson resources as a zipped up file. So I just take the project and I put it under lesson resources at each stage. All right, make sure you save it all. And let's observe the effect here. So let's relaunch it. And here's the item, very good. So notice by default it shows an expanded view, show details. So uncheck that, show details. All right, click on edit for a second and look very carefully, right? This time when I click on edit and you look into the upper left-hand corner, notice the little page icon doesn't flicker anymore when I do that, when I interact, as you can see with the details view. All right, but let's make sure that it's actually working. So edit here. I'm going to say it's just John Smith and then click update. Okay, click new for a second. Maria Castro. And then hit insert. All right, go down to 4. So that is saving as expected. Same thing with 3, 2, and 1. They're available. Let's delete one of these to be sure. All right, so delete Amidala Jones. All right, so Maria Castro is working. So everything is looking good so far. Now, by default, notice this shows up in expanded view mode. Maybe you want to have that show up this way and show details, but it's not expanded, so it doesn't take too much space. So let's fix that one last bit as an example. So now the question is, how would you go about it? There's so much code here already, correct? What do you do? So you got to look at the checkbox more carefully here, and you see where it says checked. Okay, set that equal to false for a second, and let's observe the result. So build a page. All right, and now take a look here. So I have set checked on the checkbox to false. The question is, will this be enough so that when the page comes up, the panel is not visible but hidden? So launch it. Let's take a look. It's the best thing you can do here. Observe the result. Let's see what happens. And unfortunately, that controls us the checkbox. As you can see, though, the panel is still visible down below. So close this for a second. And what we can do next is this. On the panel object, so make sure you're working with the panel right here. Okay? The panel within the content template, which is then within the update panel. The panel here, you see where it says run it, right before that type something like visible and set that equal to false. And let's see what that does for us. So I've set a new attribute and a new value on the panel. Let's observe the results. So build it. And let's see whether that will work. So hit Google Chrome. Let it come up for a second here. Okay, notice that it's hidden at first. That's good. So now let's see. Hit the button and it says show details. Very good. Let me just zoom out a bit. Okay, move it over. Close it. That's hiding. Expanded. Showing. Closing. Showing. So make sure you keep experimenting by clicking, reloading the page, making sure that everything snaps back to its original position, and so on. I close that for a second. And I think for our purposes, this is pretty good. So remember, there's a lot of code here on the lesson resources. Everything is provided as a zipped up file. So while I cannot show you all of the code from top to bottom in one window anymore, I still want to go over the major pieces just to be sure that you're keeping up. There's a lot of it. So make sure, first of all, within the head section, you have these basic chunks that define the style sheet, the scripts jQuery, and the scripts jQuery UI. Make sure you've got those. All right, scroll down below, and remember we have this form object that comes by default. I'm going to collapse things for a second. You've got the form, and the form contains the following. Make sure you've got the script manager right after the form. Then right after that, make sure you've got a div with an ID of dvdiv class element and style position : absolute. All right, if you collapse that, remember it's going to collapse the corresponding opening and closing tags. All right, within that div, now make sure that you've got a basic checkbox as shown here. Let me zoom out slightly. So ID check details view, auto post back true, checked false, run at server. And make sure it's got this something that says unchecked changed equals check details view underscore checked change. This is the connection to C#. And then make sure that in C# in main.aspx.cs, you've got this bit of code right here. Okay, right here. So if the box is checked, make the panel visible. If the box is not checked, make the panel invisible. And make sure this code is going right here and check details view underscore checked changed. Okay, now below that, remember we should have the following. You've got this update panel, and that contains everything that we have created, the entire user interface element. And remember, the update panel operates with a content template, so make sure you stick a content template next, like that. So update panel, opening, closing, as you see here on the page. Then within that, you have a content template, which is collapsed right now, as you see. So then expand that node, and within that, remember you should have a basic panel with an ID of DV panel. That is the object that we collapse and expand with the checkbox. And remember, the update panel has a different purpose, so we reduce flickering. So within the panel now, you've got this thing called a details view. And the only thing I might want to do with the details view is actually break up its properties over multiple pages. And the best thing that you can do is, if you don't understand the purpose of something, is remove it and then try to run the code and see what happens as a result. Okay? That's the best thing that you can do. So here we've got the ID, the run at server, allow paging true. So remember, paging means you can go through the data and pages. Auto generate rows, false. Data key names employee ID, correct. All right, data source, employees table source. We made that at the beginning. We've got these bound fields. So you've got the data field employee ID. The header text is emp ID. You can change that like that. It's more meaningful than just emp ID. And then you can look with the other ones. So this is the details view. Lastly, on the bottom, remember we had the SQL data source that looks as shown here. It's already a lot, but you've got to pause it, read through it very carefully. This is very similar to what we've done before. Pretty much the same thing, in fact. And lastly, remember on the bottom, we had the scripts block where we had the jQuery that makes the object draggable, droppable, and savable between page loads using local storage and JSON. All right, I wanted to go over those elements, make sure that you're keeping up and you've got everything present in roughly the same sequence. And I'm going to see you in the next one.